morning. I'm Amy Casavina Hall from United Way of Connecticut. And today we're coming together to learn about wealth building opportunities for families in Connecticut. Um, all of us on this call are either champions or advocates to make sure that our residents in Connecticut have the resources that they need to afford life's essentials now and the resources to build wealth into the future and for generations to come. And so that's what we're really thinking about today, into the future and generations to come, which can be hard when there's so many immediate challenges facing folks, but we've got unique opportunities. And in fact, Connecticut is in the most unique place in the country to think about asset building and wealth building over time. And why it's so important is because we think about the income gap a lot, but the wealth gap, the kind of unequal distribution of assets, that's property, that's retirement funds, that's savings, is so stark and so large, particularly in Connecticut. It's one of the greatest in the nation. And we see it by geography, we see it by race and ethnicity, and we see it by gender. So we've got two opportunities for us to think about how we as helpers and supporters and connectors in this state can connect with people to make sure they know about and are taking the most advantage of and making really work for them. Two distinct opportunities: Connecticut baby bonds and the federal 530A accounts, also known as Trump accounts. But you'll see in most of the materials today, we're going to talk about 530A accounts. So just that language note, so we're all on the same page. So again, why are we talking about this? Well, Connecticut is the only state in the nation that has a fully implemented statewide baby bond program, which is pretty amazing. And now with federal legislation, we have these 530A accounts. And if you're a family and you're working hard and you're raising your kids, like you're just trying to get the laundry done and make sure everything's going, it's confusing. It's a lot, right? It's a lot to understand and take apart and think about. What does this mean for me? What do I need to do? What are the implications of doing any of these things for myself or for my kids? So to help close that gap, we're connecting with you today to bring the experts to you, people who work with families every day. This is an overview session. It is not our expectation that you will leave here as experts, but you are the people that can help families know about these options and tap into these options. What do I do next? What might this mean for me? That's what we're hoping you'll leave with today. More of that information or how you can get more involved in these different opportunities. So our agenda today is a sandwich agenda. We're going to hear first from State Treasurer Eric Russell about our Connecticut Baby Bonds program. We are then going to pivot and we're going to hear from our panelist, David Radcliffe, about really from a policy perspective, how these things are the same and different. And then we're going to close up with our partners, Pat Gentile and Juan Barrios from Simplify CT, to hear really from a practical sense, what are 530A accounts? What do they mean for families? How can I make this opportunity potentially work for families that I serve? And just to say that these different opportunities and why we really want to reach out about this, on the surface, they can look pretty similar, right? We've got these long-term saving opportunities focused on children in Connecticut, but they are very different and intentionally different, and the policy behind them and how they're structured and how people access them. So this is our chance to go beyond kind of the very superficial thing. Oh, I'm one, I don't need the other, right? And think about how are these the same and different, and how they may not work for people, families I can help connect in Connecticut. So this session is focused on, again, kind of the helpers. I see we've got a great smattering on the call today. We've got municipalities, we've got social service providers, we've got healthcare providers, we've got funders in Connecticut. I'm thrilled you're all here. Thank you. But to think about what might this mean for the people we serve? What information should I have? How can I connect people to these resources? We will not be discussing any individual scenarios today. So questions about, well, I think I'm enrolled, but I'm not. We won't be doing those types of questions today. But if you do have questions, we'll be sure to link you to the appropriate resources so you can do follow-up and get the help that you need. So that is our agenda for today. In advance, I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank the team at United Way of Connecticut who makes all this little magic happen, which I deeply appreciate every day. And for all of you all joining us and taking kind of a deep dive into something that's probably not central to most of our work, but something that can really add value to what we do and to the people we serve. And before I hand it over to our panelists, a few housekeeping notes. We are recording, which I'm sure that you noticed. We will be sharing the recording and the slides after the presentation. So please, if you've missed something, know we will directly blast out to you a link to the presentation and the materials. We are in webinar format, which means we'll be taking questions in Q&A mode. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function in your control bar to share that question with us. We'll be looking at those and helping queue some of them up or have time at the end of the session to do Q&A. And if you need closed captioning, please also look at your bottom menu at the bottom of your screen. Sometimes you need to go to that ... more section to turn on the closed captioning function. All right. With that, I'm going to kick us off and introduce our panelists for today. So we're going to start with Connecticut State Treasurer Eric Russell. We're so glad you can join us today. Treasurer Russell is our 84th state treasurer. I learned that this morning. And I've always wondered exactly what does it mean to be the state treasurer. I've got this very high level. So in that role, he manages the state's pension funds, debt, cash flow, unclaimed property, and the Connecticut Higher Education Trust, also known as CHET. The key achievement of his first term was launching the nation's first statewide baby bonds initiative, what we're going to talk about today. I'm also happy to share that Eric is a New Haven native. And before becoming the state treasurer, he practiced law as a partner at Pullman and Coley. Treasurer Russell advised municipalities in Connecticut on state financing and lots of other things that sound very complex and related to municipality financing, which set him up for his role as treasurer. And many of us also know Treasurer Russell that in 2002, he made history as the first Black, openly LGBTQ person elected to statewide office in U.S. history. And we will drop a link in the chat so you can go directly to the treasurer's office and see the baby bonds program and learn more about the office of the treasurer. So with that, Treasurer Russell, so happy to have you here and to turn over the presentation to you.
Thank you, Amy. Really appreciate it. And thank you to the United Way of Connecticut for all of your work and for bringing us together for this really important and exciting conversation. I'm also honored to be on with my other fellow panelists. And then just want to say thank you to everyone for joining today for this conversation around asset building and economic opportunity for Connecticut families. The discussion is really about long-term stability, right, and generational wealth and making sure that every child across our state has a strong financial foundation. And I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to do here in Connecticut, in large part because of many people on this call who really fought for something innovative and transformative in bringing a first in the nation baby bonds program here to Connecticut. I think it says something about how we are thinking longer term, how we are making critical investments in our young people and in future generations, how we are trying to tackle very directly poverty head on, but also thinking about the economic opportunity for our state long term as well, understanding that we often talk about these policies as just expenses, and the reality is that they are investments in our future. They are investments in our future workforce and investments in understanding that the more people we have meaningfully participating in the process in our economy, the better off we all are. And so as we continue to do this across the state and addressing key challenges like housing and childcare, and so many of the challenges that working families are facing in Connecticut and across the country, I think we also need to be thinking about how we're addressing many of these long-term challenges, particularly in Connecticut as a state with one of the largest wealth gaps in the country. Gia, if we could just bring the slides up. I will go through very briefly on the next slide here, just a brief overview of what I plan to cover. And I will try to run through this pretty quickly so that we leave plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. So we'll go through a high level of what baby bonds are, eligibility, kind of the initial investment and how we are investing those funds, they're growing, and then how funds can be used. And then we'll just talk about baby bonds in comparison to some of the other types of wealth building accounts that are in existence here in Connecticut, and as was mentioned, the new 530A accounts as well. So on the next slide, this is an overview of Connecticut baby bonds for those that may not be familiar. The program launched on July 1st of 2023. And with that, now every child who is born into poverty in Connecticut, which we use if their birth is covered by Husky, the state's Medicaid program, there is automatically $3,200 that is invested on behalf of that child. And we are investing those funds in the treasurer's office with a professional investment team alongside our broader pension assets so that those funds are growing over the life of that child. And then when they are between the ages of 18 and 30, they can access those funds for wealth building purposes. So this is about really giving young people a real foundation. I think about my parents' own story and my experience growing up in a community where people worked really hard to make ends meet and to get by and paid their rent every month. And the difference between them being able to purchase a home or having an asset that was going to grow in value over time versus paying rent to someone else was having that initial capital to start that wealth building process. And so when an individual is between the ages of 18 and 30, they can access these funds for one of the designated purposes around wealth building, purchasing a home here in Connecticut, starting or investing in a Connecticut business, helping to pay for post-secondary education or job training, or rolling those funds into a retirement savings account. So again, designed specifically around wealth building, while we understand that there are other challenges around access to income and others, the real goal here is long-term wealth building. On the next slide, this highlights the power of investment, right? So with baby bonds, we project growth at 6.9%. That is the same rate of return that we anticipate on our broader pension fund. And so you see here that at that 6.9%, the longer someone has or waits before they access funds, the more those funds will grow over time. But we anticipate that individuals would be able to access between $11,000 and $24,000 conservatively at the time that they access the capital. What I think is also important about this is the goal here is that individuals will be able to see these funds growing. They'll get to understand the power of investment and to see their money moving over time, which I think, again, is really important, particularly for individuals that haven't had access to capital or funds to kind of see what that may look like for them long term. The next slide just talks briefly about eligibility and how individuals actually claim those funds. The only requirements here, as I mentioned, individual has to be between the ages of 18 and 30. They have to be a Connecticut resident at the time that they access the funds. So if an individual, say a child is born here, eligible for baby bonds, their family moves out when they are 10 years old, say to Massachusetts, if they come back at 25, they will still have access to those funds as long as they are a Connecticut resident at the time. There's also the requirement that they complete a financial education course. And, we know how critical financial education is broadly. I'm proud of the work that we've done in Connecticut to make it a requirement for high school graduation. What we want to do is make sure that individuals that are accessing this capital are empowered and they're prepared to make financial decisions that are going to most benefit them. And so that is an additional requirement for accessing the funds. On the next slide, what is also very important to note is that those are the only requirements for eligibility. And so there's no need for anyone to enroll or to sign up for baby bonds, though we are encouraging families as we notify them to sign up for notifications for continued information so that we can continue to keep that path open for communication. But we did not want to have any barriers for eligibility. We also understand that if you think about people who are living in poverty, their interaction with government is usually not positive, right? It's often punitive. It's government reaching out when you've done something wrong or when they need something from you. And so making sure that we didn't have drop off for people who were not signing up or enrolling was really key. But I also think that this is really important as kind of creating this bridge and pathway for trusted communication between families and baby bonds recipients when it's very positive to start. And so next slide. This just highlights some of our community partnerships and what we refer to as our ambassador network. And this has been really critical to the success of the program overall. One, in terms of people that we worked with, and like I said, many folks directly on this call who were key in getting baby bonds passed and funded and launched to begin with, but now also making sure that we're building out this program in a way that is most beneficial to the families that we're serving, right? And trusted community organizations, the folks that are educating families and, excuse me, gathering feedback. There's so much credibility there, right? In the community, nonprofits, schools, healthcare providers. And so what we've done is continue to build out this ambassador network to make sure that we are getting feedback from the community about what is most helpful and most needed, but also so we have trusted members of the network on the ground communicating directly with families about these opportunities, about resources that are out there, building again this bridge in a way that families can really receive what we're trying to do and continue to inform what we're building out moving forward. On the next slide, this is just a list of some of our kind of the ambassador network. Again, folks that have been really key to the progress that we are making. We're also happy to make some of this information available. What I would note is that, and there's contact information at the end of this presentation, but please feel free to reach out. We are always looking for more people to partner with in this work. And so don't hesitate to reach out to us. Next slide. This just highlights some of the key components to the overall program and many of the partners that play an integral role in the progress that we are making. DSS, who we work very closely with, who we're getting information from, we're directly serving baby bonds families. Obviously, parents and guardians who we are communicating with directly upon them having a child that is born eligible for baby bonds. Our ambassador network, as I mentioned, vendors. We're in the process right now of hiring a customer relationship management system so that we have the ability to kind of open these lines of communication. We obviously are limited on resources that we have in the office to administer the full program. Our philanthropic partners, we have the Baby Bond Trust set up as a 501c3. And so one, we've had incredible partners that have been supportive of us. Connecticut Project, who I think is on the call, as we've been building this out. So some of that resource to help us get us off the ground, but also as we're partnering with philanthropic organizations to build out additional wraparound services and supports around baby bonds. We know that this is, again, this trusted way of communicating with some of the most in need families in our state, and we want to maximize that opportunity to connect them with resources and opportunities that are there. So I will jump to the next slide here. And this is just, I think, highlighting the impact of the program overall and the immense need in one of the wealthiest states in the country. So this is as of the end of March. As I said, we're heading into our 3 years of the program being off the ground, but just shy of 43,000 children born eligible for baby bonds here in Connecticut already. We expect that number to be about 48,000 by the end of the year. So that'll the kind of full 3 years of the program. And so this is a direct investment in these kids, in these families in our state, which we just are so incredibly excited about. Next slide, and we're coming to a close here so I can kick it over to others. This highlights the overall fund. And so we made an initial investment into the Baby Bond Trust with $398 million that was freed up from a reserve. And what that did was cut off hundreds of millions of dollars of cost for what it was going to take to fund the initial program, because we've been able to have this longer runway to get investment performance. I mentioned our target is the 6.9 rate of return. We've been drastically outperforming that. Just on this fiscal year, so far, we're performing close to 11%. And we've been able to, over the last 3 years as an overall fund, we've performed at over 12.4%. What that does is grow the base of the fund to make sure that we can continue to fund baby bonds, you know, well and over this 12-year period that we've set it up for. But it also, how much money individuals are accessing at the end is tied to this performance as well. And so there's the ability for individuals to really end up potentially with more money than what we were pretty conservatively projecting. Next slide, and then we will close this out in a second. So this is just a comparison between some of the accounts, and I know David and others are going to go into some detail. Gio, if you could just click on either the full or short comparison, that's a click tab there. This highlights, and maybe it's not going to work, so if there's no problem, don't worry about it. It highlights the difference between some of the other wealth building accounts that are out there, whether that's baby bonds, whether it's our Chet 529 programs, whether it's the 530A accounts, as was mentioned. It highlights some of the key differences. And I think this is important in that, what it does is show, I think, some of the really important key pieces to baby bonds and why I think there are some challenges with Trump accounts, for example. When you think about actually the goal of this is closing the wealth divide, I worry that 530A accounts may exacerbate that problem when you have everyone getting the same amount of money and individuals being able to contribute more money to these accounts. And obviously families that have more resources are going to be able to do that in a disproportionate way. What I will say is that while we're here in Connecticut and these programs exist, we do want to make sure that our families are being able to benefit. We don't want people missing out. And so we'll continue to do the work to try to be helpful on that front. But I do think that and we've been in communication with other states and with the administration about really how to make the 530A accounts better. And I do think that, not for Connecticut to toot its own horn, but I do think that our model is much stronger around addressing many of the kind of equity and wealth disparity challenges that exist across the country. And so if we just go to the last slide, Gio, our contact information is on that slide, also on the website. I really just want to thank everyone for all of your work and the long-term commitment to Connecticut Baby Bonds. I'm really excited about this. I think it's a testament to the state and the political courage that so many really took up and used to think about something that frankly is not going to be, I'm not going to be in office when these kids get the ultimate benefit of, but I think it's about making these long-term investments in bigger picture challenges. I'm really proud of the work that we've done over the last 3 years to stand this program up. I think when you're doing something for the first time, what it also requires is there's a lot of pressure to make sure you're doing it the right way. And I'm really proud of my team and all of our partners in the work that we've done to get there. But also know that there's a lot of work ahead and want you all to know that we're looking for partnership in doing that. This is an enormous opportunity with access to capital, but also all of the other surrounding potential services and supports and opportunity that this program really can create. And so we hope that you continue to collaborate. We look forward to continuing to do this work with you and want you to know that this is your program just as much as ours. And we look forward to continuing to work together to make this the best it can be. So thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Russell, so much. I think you should feel totally fine about tooting your own horn. And we should be really excited in Connecticut, right? This is unbelievable. We have made this happen. The idea that we're closing in on 48,000 families is enormous, right? And that it's been so thoughtful and structured to really think about what do we know works with policy to make sure we're targeting the kids and families that need this the most, with the idea of we are intentionally trying to close that wealth or asset gap and thinking about what is the best that we can do to make that happen, and then putting the money on the table and the expertise and the infrastructure and the support to follow through on that is an unbelievable achievement. So we should all be really proud of that. And we've got some questions in the chat that we're going to work hard to answer through the presentation. But just quickly, you've got a group here that are really potential ambassadors, if not officially already ambassadors. What is it that what is your number one ask of us? What can we do to help make this program as successful as possible?
So I think one thing that's key is just communication out in the community and really creating that feedback loop for us. We are constantly looking for ways to improve the program as we're working with philanthropy, thinking about some of the best potential wraparound supports, and additional kind of programming that we can build in that would be beneficial to families. There's still a lot of steps that we are looking to take here. I know there was a question about kind of a portal for families to be able to track those funds. These are all things that we're working on building out. Obviously our top priority was making sure we stood this up in a way that the key components of the program worked, right? So sharing of information with DSS, MOUs, protections around HIPAA and legal compliance, notification to families to make sure that we understand that this is access to capital, but also expect that this is going to change behavior as families and children know that they have this opportunity that's out there. And so standing up a lot of those core pieces, and now we are going to continue to build on that. I think having ambassadors creating that feedback loop around what can be helpful, what we can be doing differently is incredibly powerful for us, and communicating in a trusted way to families on the ground. Amy, you're on mute, I believe.
I'm glad I was the first one to
Oh,
do it. I'm glad I broke the ice on that. So, I mean, I think this is part of that one small piece of a larger effort that we can all do. And the numbers that stick in my head are not only that 48,000, but thinking about 18, 11,000, about $11,000 is the projection. And, up to, I believe it was 25, that like $24,000 mark. Like, you want to get people's attention? That got my attention, right? It's so hard for us to think long term, but those are big, powerful numbers. So that's what I'll carry around with me and what I'll be talking about when I'm connecting with families and thinking about my network of people that I care about and connect with in my community. So thank you so much. And for helping break through, right? Being the leader is awesome. It's also really hard and you got to figure all this stuff out. So we appreciate you and your team and all the folks that on the forefront and in the middle and to come are going to be working on implementing and improving Connecticut baby bonds.
thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. So we're at the middle part of the conversation. So this was hopefully a sense of you've heard about Connecticut baby bonds. What is it? What does it mean? How does someone get it? Hopefully we've answered those questions and what can it mean for them? Now we're going to turn it over to our partner, David Radcliffe. David is a state and local policy director with the New Schools Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy. Best title ever. Just have to say that. Previously, David was part of the Connecticut State Office of the Treasurer, right, where he helped build and implement and really advocate for establishing baby bonds in Connecticut. He was a policy analyst with the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. Still the best tour I've ever had in my life. Thank you for that, David. I so loved that. And what I love the most is he started as a community grassroots organizer, and I know that's in your DNA. Right. And now David lives with his family as a Connecticut resident. So a national voice on talking about baby bonds, but asset building and wealth building opportunities in general and how we break that wealth gap. We're so happy to have you here in Connecticut and to help us think about, we're really focused in, let's pull back and think about policy, infrastructure, how were things designed? Why were they designed? How are they the same and different? So David, happy to hand it over to you for that.
Thank you, Amy and United Way and all for making the time to be here together this morning. I'm going to pull up some slides. Can you all see those?
Yes, we can.
Presentation here. Okay, so I know it's coming up on lunch, but I will challenge you. What is that a picture of? That is a baby. Yes, it is a baby, but not any old baby. This is the first baby bond baby in America, born right here in Connecticut. His name is Nolan, and this little rascal will be 3 years old just in a few weeks, incredibly. So that's super cool and inspirational. I'm going to talk a little bit about the 538 counts and sort of how they fit in with this larger picture. And it helps to sort of orient sort of where baby bonds fits in sort of this image, which you might find interesting. We think oftentimes of policy sort of in the surviving domain, which we have to do and do better. And if you think of the refrigerator in your house or a house of someone you know or love as the access to things that we use on a regular basis, you're in and out of the fridge. Same thing, income is a flow of resources into our homes that we rely on to be able to afford our lives. And income takes the shape of wages in exchange for labor, things like child tax credit, which we will have one day in Connecticut, emergency savings, guaranteed income, all the things to help us afford our lives. On the other hand, we have the basement, which is the debt. It takes away from the income through money that we're paying other people. That could be medical debt, credit card, student loans, etc. Where we want to be and where Baby Bonds sits is in the pantry. So we want to all be in the pantry. Come on in. Everyone crowd into the pantry. Wealth is represented by this pantry. It's a stock, it's a reserve of resources. So whereas income is a flow of resources, wealth represents the capital that we need to weather economic shocks, pandemics, recessions. To have the capital, we need to start a business or to buy a home. And that gets us from the surviving domain over to thriving. And that's a refresher on where we sit with baby bonds. And also, it's important to recognize and remember that there's certain myths that many of us carry with us about how the economy works and doesn't. And it is no longer true that hard work alone ensures stability or that savings alone can overcome low starting capital position. That income and education guarantee upward mobility, and that playing by the rules protects us from economic shocks. Um, Now, we want these things. We want to reward hard work. We want to be able to save. We want good education. But it's also true, underlying these individual behaviors and characteristics, that the structures and systems of our economy has set us up, many of us, in a way that we can't be full participants in our communities and economy. So the work and leadership, just a quick shout out again to Connecticut around baby bonds, and I'll get into 530As, is that if not for Connecticut's leadership with baby bonds, we would not be seeing the interest and momentum from other places wanting to be like Connecticut to do a baby bond style program. So, major props to State Treasurer Russell, to his team, Jen, Kevin, all of those, without whom we would not be in this moment and having this map, which shows there are 20 states that have either introduced or are seriously considering baby bond legislation. The yellow pins represent 10 baby bond pilot projects that have popped up in 9 different states, red, blue, and purple. So this is a bipartisan issue that is getting a lot of interest around the country. So rounding second base. So what are 530A accounts? They came from last summer's federal HR1 budget that passed. And the 530A represents a number of where it rests in the IRS tax code. So when you hear 401ks or 529 college savings plans or 401c, all these numbers rest in the IRS tax code. So that's where 530As sit. And what are they, you might ask? Well, they are new tax advantage savings account. It's a pilot program that supports that anyone could open. And for those born between January 1st of 2025 and December 31st of 2028, those babies can receive a $1,000 seed contribution from the federal government. Additionally, these allow outside contributions, could be from government, families, employers, charity, etc., maxing out to $5,000 annually. They're similar in many ways to traditional IRAs and a 529 college savings plans. The rules for how these accounts will behave in some ways are still a little uncertain and in some cases still TBD. So in that way, impacts on benefits, on taxes and assets aren't 100% known at this moment and can be complicated depending on one situation. And importantly, Treasurer talked about how baby bonds, the enrollment is automatic. 530A accounts, at least at this point, it's opt-in. So there are things that families have to do to have their family be engaged with an account. So the 530A enrollment process works like this. So a family or some other adult on behalf of a child must actively enroll. So do things, I'm sure Pat and Juan will talk about this, to enroll their family. It could be through filing taxes and as a standalone form called 4547 that you would file. You could also open an account through the program's online portal. So a social security number is not technically required for the parents, But there is some fine print that suggests without it or without a ITIN identifying number that applications may not be processed as expeditiously, if at all. So that's something to think about as well. Once the enrollment is submitted, so you've signed up for an account, the Treasury Department sets it up. And then starting actually this July 4th is when the first $1,000 seed from the federal government would be deployed. And then at that point, then others from the outside can make additional contributions. So because of the current design of 530A accounts, there is a thing where those who will likely participate are those who are already fairly well resourced, who are sort of plugged into the financial system, who have advisors, who are maybe from more resource families. So in the current form, it really is the case that 530 accounts will benefit those who are already in a wealthier position. And if the world had the Pat Gentiles of the world and Simplify CTs, that might be a different story. But in the current form, they really are rich get richer. And there are folks advocating for automatic enrollment, which could be an improvement, and still that's TBD if that'll happen. There are some additional risks and challenges to keep in mind. And some of these are like zooming out, like in the helicopter over the country, and which may be different than an individual choice that a family may make and whether or not to engage with the 530A account. The things that concern us and keep us up at night really about 530As is that they're really focused on privatizing a lot of the investment that we think should rest significantly more in the public domain. And in fact, the Treasury Secretary himself, U.S. Treasury Secretary last summer suggested that 530A accounts is a way to privatize Social Security. And there are some concerns if that were to actually be the case in terms of the promise that the government makes for those who've worked their whole lives to hopefully have a secure retirement. It's also a thing that the 530 accounts were offered within a larger federal budget that does real material harm to families in terms of increased healthcare costs, loss of food support, and other benefits. So on the one hand, it might be appealing to have $1,000, but some analysts have suggested it will cost individual families more than $1,000 each year in terms of lost benefits, increased costs through tariffs, and all the things. So just that broader context might be helpful to keep in mind. There are still some uncertainty around the management fees in terms of what that might do in terms of whittling away the account value, particularly for those who are lower resourced to begin with. The investment costs are capped, but the management and reporting fees are still unknown. It's also a thing that IRS has a data sharing agreement with federal immigration authorities. So if you are in a family with maybe an undocumented mom and or dad, there's some things to keep in mind about are there things to consider on applying for an account in this current environment? Again, I'm rounding third base finally. That these accounts do rely significantly on charity and philanthropy. And while we appreciate and applaud those with means to sort of give back, we do worry a bit about the ability for philanthropy to sort of meet this moment at scale. The treasurer talked about the wealth gap in Connecticut and America, and there just is not enough philanthropy to sort of close that gap in a meaningful way for all young people. Again, benefit protections are uncertain, and I'll just a couple more slides. This is sort of a chart, and we'll share these slides afterwards to do a deeper dive, sort of lining up where baby bonds in the Connecticut form line up with 529 and 530A accounts. Purposes are a little different. Enrollment is certainly different. Public management, progressive funding, more substantial seed funding for baby bonds versus the 529, 530As. Risks are more shared in the public fund in the form of baby bonds, less so with the individual accounts. And then those who benefit are also different between the two. This isn't a possibly detailed chart, but it's cool. It came from a Brookings article late last year, and we'll share it around. But it shows even a little bit more detail the different categories. And the treasurer's slide was much better, much cleaner and tighter. But if you want the deeper dive, we'll share that. So here we go. There's home plate. We see it. What's so good about 530As? Well, we're in Connecticut. Having baby bonds with 530As is next level. And we are the envy of the country in that regard. And other states are thinking about how to complement potentially 530As with a more forward-looking, equitable fund like we have here in this state. 530As have opened up the conversation in a bipartisan way on the role that wealth building plays in America. And importantly, that the government has a role in doing something about it. So we imagine that we'll see more state innovation over time. There I am, home plate, and there's another baby. Look at that little rascal. This is an actual baby bond baby in New Mexico as part of a baby bond pilot in that state. So we're hoping in future presentations we'll have more babies in Connecticut and beyond. That is it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yeah, babies always win. Let's just say, well done. Babies always win. As promised, right, a lot of information on a lot of different type of vehicles and kind of trying to put them together and pull them apart. But really, thank you, David, for helping us pull back and think about the difference between these and kind of, intent and structure and opportunity, which I think you did so really well. I want to point out that on one of the slides, you kind of listed like, here's the challenges that we're flagging, right? And many of them were really policy related, right? Like the difference between the intention of closing the wealth gap versus, helping people promote early savings. Those are very different things. Both have strengths, but they're not the same, right? And I really want to flag that you noticed or pulled out the fact that at a time when benefits and services, particularly for low income families, are getting cut, right? That $1,000 investment does not come close to equal the loss of SNAP benefits or the loss of healthcare benefits, and just helping us remember to hold on to the big picture, that it is great. We know long-term savings are important. We want people to have those. They're an essential part of the picture, but not at the expense of not being able to, have food on the table today. And I just appreciate that there's people out there thinking about those questions. And I just want to flag that you noted that there's a chance to shape this, right? That this is still kind of under construction. I know Pat and Juan are going to kind of go into some detail about, there are very practical things about this that are under construction, but what are our opportunities to help shape this, right? If you were to say, here's what you need, here's what you can do right now to make sure that at the federal government, we're most thinking about the importance of savings and structuring things in a way to get to our goals of eliminating those wealth gaps and putting more families on a better track for financial success. What could we do? What's the most important action we could take?
Well, that's a big question.
Sorry.
I'll take me an hour to answer, but in 30 seconds. I think the real thing, Treasurer teed it up, is that if we are able to amend 530 accounts to have them look much more similar to the model here in Connecticut for baby bonds, that would do it. Having automatic enrollment, more progressive funding, potentially caps on outside contributions from wealthier families, make sure benefits and assets are protected, potentially pooling the account and having them publicly protected rather than individual accounts. Some of these are very hard to do and would require acts of Congress, but some of them are administratively possible through Treasury and IRS. So if you like baby bonds in Connecticut and would like to see this happen naturally in a more equitable way, letting your elected officials know, particularly the federal electeds, would be the move.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think we can all acknowledge we're on the new frontier with this. Nothing is perfect, and we've got more to get right in Connecticut, as the treasurer noted, but wow, kudos to Connecticut for putting so many right things in place that we know work from a policy perspective, like auto enrollment, right, and targeting. So, it's good to feel pride. It's good to be part of something that's exciting. And so thank you for that. Thank you for that, David. Now we're going to transition to thinking about, okay, if you are someone who works with families and they've got these options, they might be eligible for one, not for the other. How do people think about this? How do we help guide and support people? I'm so happy to have some of my favorite colleagues on the call to talk with us about that today. We've got Pat Gentile, CPA. Pat is a CPA who has extensive background as a CFO and a COO. You ready, Pat? I put this together as in the multinational financial industry as I tried to digest your bio. Is that accurate? Is that a decent summary?
That's more accurate, but I would like to say that I'm more, my time has been spent the last 6 years helping families that are at risk and need help in our community. So I'm more focused on that than I've ever been before.
That is fabulous. And so you stole my next line, so I don't have to say that.
And actually, Juan is going to go first, if that's okay.
Great. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm going to inch you both together.
Awesome.
And Juan Barrios, he's well known for his leadership in the social service sector and his tenure at HRA of New Britain. And he's become one of the state's biggest proponents and practitioner of the IRS-sponsored free tax preparation service. To those of us, we call it VITA. He's one of our, Pat and Juan together are part of our VITA gurus that help lead that work in Connecticut. And together they work with underserved communities throughout Connecticut to provide best-in-class tax services through VITA. And my words here are championing technology, inclusion, and innovation, and advocacy efforts to increase the financial success of households across Connecticut. And I'll drop the link to Simplify CT in the chat in the moment. But Juan and Pat, so great to have you here. You're doing this work with families. What does it look like? What are you finding? What are you learning? How are you making it happen? Just that. If you could just answer that, that would be wonderful.
Well, hello, everybody. Juan Barrios, Executive Director. Thank you, Amy, for that tremendous introduction. And also thank you to our State Treasurer for all of his tremendous work in establishing the Baby Bonds program. But it's tremendous just to hear the, a couple years out, how successful this program is becoming and is primed for future success. And thank you again, too, to David Radcliffe for all of his insights and really, really, really great information and just really good food for thought when it comes to, the 530A accounts, which is what we're also calling them. I think Gio is supposed to share my slides, so if not, I have some. So, so the way that we look at 530A accounts is that we have an opportunity to break the intergenerational poverty divide here, not only in Connecticut, but also nationwide. As David mentioned, while there are many issues and potential issues with 530A accounts, we recognize this as a way in which the United States government has recognized that there is an opportunity to start some generational wealth building at the early ages here. If we go to the next slide, the challenge here that we have in Connecticut is our poverty dynamics. So our overall poverty rate here in Connecticut does mirror the national average. However, we consistently rank as one of the states with the most severe income and wealth inequality in the United States. A lot of this has to do with the disparities that are driven by the stark contrast between highly affluent suburbs and struggling urban and rural areas, which result in massive gaps in wealth and education. So for example, Simplify CT, we are based out of Fairfield County, right? And it's very common for us to know and hear that Fairfield County is the Gold Coast of Connecticut. However, when you're looking at the ALICE data, the cost of living still mirrors a very large percentage of people that are still living well below their means. Despite all of this, there are still persistent racial wealth gaps that exist, as the chart here shows. And pre-tax income for median and Black and Latino households are roughly half of those median income, the median income of white households. So it is crystal clear to us here that in order to overcome this income inequality, we need to continue to build out a wealth building toolbox for the children of our at-risk families. So the way that we see a 530A account is as another tool on top of several other tools that may at least open up the conversation, towards that overarching goal. Next slide, please. So what do we consider our wealth building toolbox? So we've heard a lot today about baby bonds, which are publicly funded foundation for Husky eligible infants to narrow the racial wealth gap. We haven't really talked about it much today, but we also have CHET 529 plans, which are also tax advantage savings, specifically for education and skill development. And of course, now the 530A, we here call them the Invest America accounts, but they are the quote unquote Trump accounts for children, allowing philanthropic and federal seed money to, again, boost up savings at a very young age. So if we go to the next slide, we did as many of our presenters here have today, just have a couple slides here on the baby bonds. So from equity to birth, again, reminder that it's $3,200 that are invested for babies covered by Husky at the time of their birth. There is compounded growth with a projected value of the 11,000 to 24,000 by age 18 to 30. You can use it for home purchase, starting a business, or continuing your education. And before the withdrawal, it does require the completion of financial literacy education. Moving on. We also have, again, a 529 plan, which is meant to power our potential. So it's the premier education vehicle that helps families save for the rising cost of higher education and trade schools. So if you are to put money into a CHED account, there is a state tax deduction up to $10,000 if you're married filing jointly. These withdrawals are tax-free so long as they're related towards qualified education expenses. Any remaining balances, there are rollover options where you can invest that into a Roth IRA with any unused funds, and there's no minimum requirements to open it, which makes it accessible to all. And then last but not least, we have our 530A accounts, which represent the long-term horizon in our view, right? So again, we call it an Invest America account, but it's a child-focused individual retirement arrangement account that it's designed to provide a head start on retirement and eventually, hopefully, long-term security. There is a locked period, meaning that the funds continue to grow and they're not eligible to be accessed until that child turns age 18. There is a federal seed money of $1,000 for any children born within 2025 all the way through 2028. But one thing that's really unique with a 530A account is, again, the ability for third parties to also provide funding. So, for example, 501c3 organizations can also contribute to these accounts. So at this point, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Pat, for the remainder.
Thank you, Juan. So in terms of speaking to the advantages of the 530A, one of the biggest advantages that the Invest America accounts have right now is the capacity for third-party 501c3s to invest in an unlimited fashion. It's over and above the $5,000 that a family could put in to the program. And as you can see, the two major catalysts this year for children 10 and under are the $250 that both the Dell and the Dalio foundations are have already committed to seed new accounts. So even if your child is not newly born, if they're 10 and under, and once again, as David said, they need to enroll, and that's our goal, has been working towards helping families enroll. If they enroll into the 530A account, they will automatically receive $500 per child if they're in the state of Connecticut. So this is a big help, and this is the cornerstone of what we're trying to do at Simplify CT. We're trying to work with families and work with other organizations that are willing to help fund as 501c3s. And it's basically based upon, for this year, the Dell and Dalio is based upon low-income zip codes. So they have determined that their cutoff throughout the state of Connecticut will be for those zip codes where families on average are 150,000 and lower in adjusted gross income. Now, so it's a little bit higher than what baby bonds are just amazing tools for those who are in Husky. But as we all know, the Alice population, family of parents with two children making $90,000 to $100,000 a year, in many cases, they may not be eligible for Husky. And to boot, at that level, the state, the cost of living in Connecticut is so high that $100,000 and above, if one or two parents lose a job or have financial difficulty, they can lose everything. So we're hoping that there's a broader spectrum of families that we can reach out to by using this weapon in our arsenal. We're looking to try to, use every potential possible loophole that we can. And this is the biggest of them, is that the charitable organizations can fund an unlimited amount. The other side of it is to encourage employers to also set up a plan for people up to the $2,500 that they can actually contribute on a pre-tax basis. So we're trying to advocate to work together collaboratively through the state to find ways that organizations can help fund into these accounts in a way that'll allow parents not to have to fund themselves, or maybe to find a way for them to put aside money to match from their earned income tax credit refunds. So we're trying to build a financial literacy platform that'll address the ability to work together with parents to build wealth, generational wealth for their children. Next slide, please. This is just, once again, Treasurer Russell did an amazing job of summarizing, but this is just our tool comparison. As you see, baby bonds are just, a premier wealth equity instrument. It's just incredible, with $3,200 of seed money and the market outperforming, as Treasurer Russell indicated. There's no doubt that the 24,000 upper end will be hit, and maybe even beyond that. What's great about it is tax-free. It's truly a tax-free tool. It's amazing, and it provides enormous flexibility for someone to start a business, to buy a first home, or to go to school. So it is really, it is the anchor focus. And then this other wonderful tool that is, once again, another state tool, which is Chet, which is a little bit more difficult for lower income families, and we totally understand. It's almost a real challenge for lower income families to contribute to. This would solely be tax free, so long as Juan mentioned, it's used primarily for education. And then we have the 530A investment account, which I call a child IRA, basically. And I'm naturally focused on the charitable side of this. And all those earnings are tax deferred, which means certainly somewhere down the line, there will be a tax ramification. And hopefully, as David said, hopefully things will change over time, and hopefully this instrument will, not to the detriment of other social programs or to Social Security. Hopefully this will be an instrument that will have more flexibility as time goes on. So all three of these tools in our toolbox, I look at as the arsenal to help fight intergenerational poverty. Next slide, please. So I kind of look at the whole picture as a complementary ecosystem. And the capital for living, I look at the baby bonds as being that immediate capital that can be used at age 18. And then I look at assets for growing on a longer term basis as the 530A, as the long game, ensuring that our children over time can start to build a retirement nest egg for the future. So I look at this as a total ecosystem, a total wealth building ecosystem. And hopefully as time goes on, the tax implications on the 530A can improve a bit. Or there can be, or there possibly could be some other types of investments, like converting this child IRA into a Roth later on, so that there's no tax implications. So there are clever ways of trying to work with our community and try to find ways to help people avoid a significant tax implication. Next slide, please. The key here that we've all stressed, and Treasurer Russell and David Radcliffe has stressed, is that early engagement in partnering and mentoring with our parents. It should start immediately at birth. And that's really critical. And most importantly, at Simplify CT, we are trying to build a brigade team of volunteers that work in the VITA space that already know all of the struggles that our community is going through, and to create a mentoring program where there's annual check-ins. So there's structured reviews of the accounts, how we can help people, how we can understand, how they can ask questions on the fly, and create this whole volunteer mentorship program. So working with parents on wealth building habits and debt management, and creating some sort of, interactive gamified literacy program with children as well, so that they understand what the short and long-term implications of wealth building are. So it's really important for us, and Treasurer Russell and David hit it on the head. It's building trust with all of your partners throughout the state and working collaboratively. That is the key. Next slide, please. So from our point of view, from a day-to-day practical helping people type of model, and we help close to 15,000 people a year with providing over $20 million of benefits, is to be there on the spot, to be there right with them as they interact with us and get their refunds. So it's working with them at birth for parent literacy onboarding. It's looking towards early age check-ins for basic child literacy skills, to teach parents the basics of wealth building, and then to provide mentorship as children become older, and then generationally to continue working now with the children of those parents that we helped build this program, so that it becomes a system where youth lead youth, and then as they become older, they become the next generation of volunteers to lead across the state. And that's the only way we're going to build momentum here, is to make sure that the people that we serve are also becoming servant leaders for their next generation. And that's the key to this opportunity roadmap that we're trying to create. It takes a lot of work, a lot of lifting, a lot of heavy effort, but we have so many great partners on this call, and we know that they have built that level of trust, and we know we need to continue to work closely with everyone, and we need to make this a total win for the state of Connecticut. I think next, I think that's the last slide. Yeah, there we
All
go.
right.
And
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah.
That was excellent. I know we're a little bit over. I appreciate the folks who could stay, and I know there are folks who had to jump. We've been through a lot of content. So just say one more time. And if this isn't what you do every day, I'm sure your head is full with lots of numbers and letters. We will send this information out, the recording and all the materials. I feel like Pat and Juan, one of the things I love is you just don't have a vision for a tool. You have a vision for a whole community response, right? To how we build wealth and engage people in that. So I just want to send some heart love for that vision of Connecticut, right? Acting in a new way to give families and children across time new opportunity and possibility. Seems to me my takeaway from this is our clear call to action now for all of us on this call is we are informally or formally ambassadors to these efforts, right? This is our chance to talk to friends, families, people we serve, people in our lives to say there are really meaningful opportunities right now. Send people to trusted places to get in more information, whether that's their VITA provider or others, right, who can help them navigate these options and get the support they need. And it seems to me our next call to action is two-part. We need to, as one of the questions in the chat, we need to engage those trusted partners to make sure they have this information, that they're directing and supporting families to make the right decisions for them and to make the most of these opportunities, and that we're advocating for continued investment and support and growth in Connecticut baby bonds and for changes at the federal level, that so we can continue to have our new federal effort look more and take more of the best practices that we've put in place in Connecticut, so we can optimize on both fronts and really be winning in Connecticut in a particularly fabulous way. So thank you to everyone who's part of this conversation, who's working day in and day out, no matter what you do, to help families, again, meet the needs now, but be thinking about the future and tapping into resources to help them get to those hopes, those aspirations, those wishes and dreams. We've got new tools to make that happen, newish, and new to many of us and to many families to make that happen. And the more that we can contribute and then learn and engage and connect with others, the quicker we're gonna get there and improve and make permanent these things that are so much needed. And that is also a huge goal, right? To strengthen and improve and make permanent so families can rely on these tools and resources. And we know predictability, consistency matters. So that's part of our job too, to make that happen. I want to again thank you for everyone who joined us today. You'll hear from us soon with information and resources. Happy afternoon and talk soon, everyone. Thank you again. And thank you, panelists.
Thank you, Amy. Take care.